All right, it's that time of the week again to check out the Patchworks.com used section. Right off the bat, there are some things that we did not see last week. A used 4MS Pod 60 powered. I have 4 pods myself. I really like those. Oh, a wasp filter from Dopefer. Those things are super cool. A used 4MS Listen 4 black panel even. I use the Listen 4 quarters and I like it a whole lot. A QPOS, one of the great filters of our time from Make Noise. Oh boy, there is a Warng Soundstage V1. I really want a soundstage. What else? Oh wow, a used Make Noise No Coast that has been Eurorack modded, and it looks like it has maybe a grayscale type panel on it. So if you want to throw a No Coast in your system, then look no further. A warped vinyl from Chase Bliss. And yeah, I can't believe it. The Roland Axe 1, the keytar, is still there. How have you not acted on that? Once again, thank you to Patchworks for their continued support. Go visit them online at patchwerks.com. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Podula Modcast. My name is Tim Held, and this week I'm very excited to have Randy Jones from Madrona Labs back on the show to talk about the new Madrona Labs soft synth, Sumu. We are going to not only talk about Sumu, but Randy's going to give us a little bit of a demo, so stay tuned for that. I also am going to introduce you to the new module that I will be releasing hopefully in early 2024 with After Later Audio. It's called Keanu, and it is a matrix mixer with onboard modulation sources. So we'll get to that in a moment too. But first, I want to say thank you to everybody who supports me on Patreon. If you would like to help keep the LEDs blinking over here at PodMod, head over to patreon.com/PodularModcast. I'm going to be doing one of my, just posting randomly on Patreon. Hey, I got all this stuff. First come, first serve. If you want some of it, let me know. Patch cables, blank panels, stickers. And this won't be part of the upcoming giveaway, but it will be part of the next one. And the reason I'm waiting is I'm hoping to get more of these built so I can have more to give away. But I have the original prototype of the Keanu. It wasn't called Keanu then, and it's a little smaller, but it still is a very cool matrix mixer with onboard modulation sources. So hopefully I can get a couple more of these put together. Yeah, and if you end up claiming one, you'll be one of the very few people on Earth to have this particular module. I'm maybe even going to be able to put together some of the prototype boards from the second revision, which is a lot closer to the final product. So that's something to keep your eyes out for. Another way you can support the show is head over to PodularModcast.com and check out the store. All sorts of really cool shirts, stickers, pins, bags, notebooks, you name it. Well, actually, don't name it because I don't have there's no PodMod electric vehicle yet. Also, for those of you who live in the Pacific Northwest, I will be playing a show in Everett on December 9th. Really looking forward to that. Details right here on the screen and link to that in the show description. Had a great time playing in Tacoma just this last weekend with Runati, Pentacles, and Lousy Falcon. As always, thank you to our sponsors, Patchworks, 4MS, After Later Audio, and Novation. Link to all of their information in the show description as well. Let's check out some of the Madrona Labs synths before we jump into this conversation. All right, because Randy and I are going to be discussing Alto, Kaivo, and then, Sumu, the new soft synth from Madrona Labs, I thought it would be helpful if I kind of gave you a rough idea of what these synths are and how they work. I'm just going to briefly show you around Kaivo because the layout, interface, between Kaivo and Alto and Sumu and Verta are all pretty much the same. They have different modules and sound sources and whatnot, but yeah, I just wanted to give you a quick rundown so you weren't confused when we were having our chat. And for those of you watching, you can see Kaivo here on the screen, the interface, and for those of you listening, I will try my best to make this clear and not need the visual aid, but we'll see how it goes. So you can kind of divide all of the Madrona stuff into 3 different sections from top to bottom horizontally. At the top, we have our modulation sources. So we have a key module, a sequencer, an LFO 2D, which is very cool, a noise module, 2 envelopes. In the center is this kind of darker, blacker gray area. This is the patch bay, and you can see if you're watching that there are some lines being drawn between the outputs and inputs of the top and bottom rows. So yeah, this is just where all the connections are made. So you can just grab an output from the top, drag it to an input on the bottom, and now you have a connection. But before I get ahead of myself, what's on the bottom? Here in Kaivo, what we have is a granulator. So you can upload your different sound sources, sine waves, pretty much anything. I put a raccoon fight into this thing and turned it into music. It was really cool. And then we have a gate or a VCA, a resonator. So you can pick, different types of strings, chimes, or springs, and then a body where you got a couple different wooden box options, a metal plate, and a frame drum. So all of these modules have ins and outs, and they have these little dials, which are really, really cool. They're basically just attenuators or attenuverters, depending on what the parameter is. So you just grab, make a connection, bring it on down to any of the inputs that you'd like in any of the modules, and then you can turn that smaller dial up or down to get your signal coming in. So let's take a listen to a couple of my voices. Here's one that's called Clinky. So that one's pretty fun. So we'll take a listen to my Nightbirds series. I've got a bunch of different ones. So this is where I loaded a piece of that field recording of the raccoons fighting into the granulator as my initial sound source, and then it's gonna hit a gut string as its resonator, and then go through a small wooden box as its body. You can hear that squeaking in the background. Listen really closely. There's like a wheat. That's actually a bird. All right, so that's Nightbirds 2. Let's check out 3. You can hear that squeak again. Here's 4. Did I make a 5th? There are 5 Nightbirds. Geez, I really liked this one. It's really cool. What else did I make? Oh, Troll Lull. I got a Troll Lull series here. And then I took the podcast intro song that the Animals at Night made for the show, and I put that into the granulator, so you might be able to spot it here. Ooh, this one's a little weird. I did a couple of them. Let's go to the second one. You can kind of hear it there. So that all may have been a little confusing, so why don't we just hear Alto and Kaivo in action together really quick. Here I got the MIDI files for Gymnopede number 1, I believe, from Sati. I dropped all those MIDI files into Bitwig, and then I went through and made voices with either Alto or Kaivo for the entire piece. rather than me just play this and have you watch the screen, why don't I just drop in some fun footage and you can hear just a piece of this track that I made with Alto and Kaivo, and then we can get into this chat with Randy. And we're here with Randy from Madrona Labs. How do you like that radio voice?
I like it a lot.
Dude, I'm so excited to have you back on. And you know what? I'll have to edit this part out. This is something I meant to look up. But I wanted to see what episode you first appeared on, because it was when Ian was still co-host. So
yeah,
it was like early Pod Mod.
It was a good long time ago, maybe 5 years, and probably just after we moved in here, is my guess, like 4 years ago. And now he lives
I
in
think
the
it's probably, so you were on episode 13.
Okay.
And for context, I'm just going to look really quick. What was the last? I think it's like 267.
Up in the hundreds.
Let's see here. The last episode released was number 268. So you're going to be 270. And right that was June 18th of 2018.
Right on.
So feels like that's crazy.
Era now.
Yeah, and I think that was like one of the first times we had really ever like said more than just hi to each other.
Right? And, I didn't know you well at that point at all.
Yeah.
It's so weird how my brain was like, 4 or 5 years ago, but I determine everything from the time we moved into this house, basically, and somehow my brain got stuck on it being 5 years ago. But I guess it's been 7 years.
Well, and it's something I've talked about a few times with other people is just like how much COVID had like changed perception of time, and like things that you say are 5 years ago are actually like 8 years ago, because like those 3 years were just put in a blender and just
completely.
But yeah, so when we were there, you were talking about Alto, and I think Kaivo was out then.
Yeah, that one came out in 2014.
Okay, cool. And as you know now, since we have started working together, and I'm doing the Kaivo videos currently, I was not much of a soft synth person. I've been like hardware, and people know who've been listening to the show long enough know that I haven't been big on using soft synths. But since working with you and Kaivo, like I have gone down the rabbit hole. I've got myself an MPE controller. I got the Expert Sleepers ES9 so I can get Kaivo into my rack. And so thank you.
That's great.
You've opened my mind.
More opportunities for acquiring new and confusing pieces of gear. Yay.
Right. Well, it's funny because like, being an electronic musician and producer, as I am, it's all like obviously bedroom producing and self-taught stuff, but I've been doing it for a number of years, and getting into this, it's kind of like made me realize like, oh, I know so little about, or knew so little about MIDI and just soft synths and routing and trying, and like it was like I knew so little that it was almost like embarrassing, and I didn't want people to find out how little I knew about it, because I should know this stuff. Feeling. But
new area for sure. Yeah.
But I've learned a lot since. So we were talking about how it's been 5+ years since you were on the show, and so I was going to have you just do like a little bit of a refresher for those of you out there listening who maybe who didn't catch that episode or don't know about Madrona Labs, and just have you give give us a little history and from, alto to Kaivo, and then we can work our way up to
Yeah.
the new one.
I'll do this super short history. I mean, it was because I got to talk to you and Ian about the sound plane and everything. And that was
The
the
sound
start of
plane.
the whole Madrona Labs. So I
Okay, so
went
you
to
started with that. Okay. That was
yeah, I went to a
okay.
master's program, University of Victoria, and came up with research about how to do a better multi-touch pressure sensitive controller. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's the Hawken Continuum was out then and had been around for a while.
Uh-huh.
And there were a few other similar things. And I was like, this thing's expensive and heavy, and it's actually too expensive for me to want to buy one.
Right.
Like I just want I knew what I wanted, which was a thing like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the things about it that nothing else really was doing for me was like I knew it should be possible to just kind of like make music. Let's like you're drumming on a table. If you ever sit
Mm-hmm.
around kind of fidgeting and you have ideas, you could imagine just drumming it on the table, and
Yeah.
somehow maybe even in your own musical language, like it wouldn't
Right.
you wouldn't even have to necessarily learn keyboard chops, but just make a pattern, make a shape. Like people make
Mm-hmm.
shapes with a sequencer or whatever, just turning the knobs, and you could drum something that'd be musical. You'd hear it, and then turn it into a tune. So,
Uh-huh.
um, yeah, I wanted something and something that more like a guitar is like you don't have to learn a completely different shape for every scale. And
Uh-huh.
isomorphic is what we'd call that
Okay. Okay.
in the keyboard world. Or the weird keyboard world, rather, because you have these, and you have continuum, and then you have like hex keyboards. Those are often isomorphic too. And then you have things
Okay.
like the Linstrument, and the
Uh-huh.
Linstrument actually has the same layout
Yeah.
as this. I mean, you can add any layout you want, but generally people play it like in fourths with rows like that, because then you end up with all these nice shapes. Like this is an octave,
Mm-hmm.
this is a fourth, and that's a fifth, and so
Oh,
chords.
cool.
And it's guitar people are really comfortable
Mm-hmm.
learning it, so that's it. It doesn't really apply to me. My fingers never got along with guitar for some
Yeah.
reason, but it's a plus.
Yeah.
So
I
anyway,
want to
made this
try it. I've
thing.
never really played with it. I've
Oh
like
yeah, you should
I really want to try one
come over, we'll
because
horse around with one more sometime.
yeah.
But I got out of that master's program I was talking about at University of Victoria, and then was like, well, I'll try and make these. And like I made about 100 of them, and it was really like a incredibly intense couple of years while I was trying to get that done, as everybody who's made any hardware knows, like for the same reasons, just learning stuff you never thought you'd have to learn about
Right.
UPS and just stuff like that. And like,
Mm-hmm.
really, it cost $300 to get this to Germany. Then how am I going to make any money on one?
Wow.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff like that I didn't think of before starting out on the
Mm-hmm.
project. So successful as an instrument, but I wasn't really making money with them. And then
Mm-hmm.
I knew I wanted to make a synth that would go with it, a soft synth,
Mm-hmm.
so people could, this needs a computer. It's not by any means what people would call plug and play instrument, but at
So
least
it has
you
MIDI
can
outs.
plug it
Is
into your
that
computer
uh-huh.
and then just bring up alto, put alto into MPE mode, and then you can just play all the presets that come with
Okay.
alto. So,
Right.
and then
Right.
that alto turned out to be a thing people really liked and were buying. It was kind of the first like Buchla-ish influence soft synth that
Mm-hmm.
sounded like had those cool dong, kind
Yeah.
of low
Yes.
pass gate sounds that
Yes.
I don't even have to tell you, because in modular world there's such a important touchstone too.
Well,
Those silver apple sounds.
right. I was thinking, I think it's like, I feel like I've had a little bit of a full circle moment because, starting to work with you, doing the instruction videos on Kaivo, like really getting into Kaivo and learning its interface, which is pretty much the same as Alto. So now I can get into Alto and have fun with it. And I think because I spent 5 years building patches, going into Alto and Kaivo for me was just like I hit the ground running. And because it's it's such a good UI and it's really intuitive. Once you just kind of wrap your head a little bit around each of the sections, you're off to the races. And yeah, I guess that's just my other way of saying, like, these are just your soft synths are so beautifully designed and
Wow.
sound so good. Like, yeah, I've almost like been exclusively working with Kaivo, not just
Wow.
because I'm making the videos, but like that's where
Yeah.
my creative pull is lately. Like I'm just,
Yeah. You sent me these things. Yeah. It's cool.
it's really, really fun. So,
And
yeah.
I'm hearing new combinations of stuff with your classical interpretations
Yeah,
and some of the
yeah.
crazy Kaibo sounds. They're almost a little aggressive, is what I
So
was
that,
getting out of them.
yeah. So that's kind of,
Is
so
that like intentionally or like classical?
a little bit, yeah. Because even before I got into modular, like in my early electronic days, I've always loved classical music, and I've always wanted to do some sort of like, I guess the first ideas were maybe what I could have thought of as like remixes or like reinterpretations of these classical songs. But I can't play these songs. Like I'm not that good at piano, and there's so many
Mhm.
parts. And so, now just getting to this, I'm like, oh, I can just download these MIDI files and put them into Bitwig and then build all these different voices.
Yeah.
And I've always, my kind of mission statement, I would say, with all of my creative output has been to try to like find that really nice, like liminal space between beauty and like harsh and kind
Oh
of like,
yeah.
that tension and breaking the
100%.
tension with like taking really pretty melodies, but like putting them in strange voices. So yeah, I've been really trying to like, I think I told you about the raccoon fight that I have as a field recording. Um, I'm not sure if
Maybe.
I
I've
took
definitely
like,
heard of raccoons.
yeah, it's a pretty nasty sound. So I took that, like the piece of them like growling at each other, and I put it into the granulator in Kaivo,
Oh
and then have
yeah.
been using that as a voice for a lot of the stuff, and like just birds chirping. And so
Hmm.
yeah, I'm trying to, and that's another thing I've always wanted to find a way to do something interesting with field recordings. So I feel like this is kind of like a really good like mashup of two of these ideas that I've always had, but didn't know how to quite approach them. And then it's just like,
Right.
once I understood Kaibo, I was like, oh, this is the thing that will, this is what I need. This is the tool for that job that I've wanted
That's
to
so
do.
nice to hear. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's
Sumu
really,
is going to do other totally weird things to recordings too. So
yeah. So maybe like tell us the different itches that alto, Kaivo, Verta, and then up to Sumu will scratch for the synthesist out there.
yeah, so alto is really good. I think it's just a fun way. Like my friend James Patrick uses it a bunch to teach intro to synthesis,
Mm-hmm.
which makes me really happy because I tried to make everything really clear and design it so it's just kind of doing what it says and what it's telling you, and it's musical, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like you can see what's happening to the modulation. I think on
Mm-hmm.
all of them they've got that. It's There's probably some other soft synths that do this well too, but I can't think of which ones. But they when you modulate a dial, you see the needle. So in the dial, you see both like the place you set it to
Mm-hmm.
and like the filled in area and the needle go to the same place. But then when you modulate it, you see the needle
Yeah.
move from
Yeah.
the signal you patch in, and I think it's a good learning tool for that
I th-
reason and
I
some
think,
others,
yeah, having
because
that
it's hard
having
to
the
it's
visual
obviously I'm
feedback.
trying to like play to
Yeah.
the strengths of what computers do, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it'd be hard as hell to do that in a hardware
Totally.
module. So
Well, that's one thing I've noticed with. I'm glad that you mentioned the teaching thing, because I've done an intro to Eurorack workshop, and I've got like I've got a student right now that I do stuff online with, um and I've been like, oh, I need to just bring alto into the mix, because the visual feedback that you can see what's happening with the sound is just like, I mean, I feel like just working through Kaivo has helped me wrap my head around concepts that I had a more nebulous understanding of,
right,
just because of that. So sorry, I
thanks, good to hear.
interrupted your whole thing.
No worries. I mean, I, yeah. So Also, though, sonically, getting back to that, because that's
Mm-hmm.
now we can talk about all of them sonically.
Mm-hmm.
And sonically, like the itch hit scratch was really a personal one. Like when I did synth stuff, I was really into I'm into like the sounds that I'm drawn to on synthesizers are like um, I would almost describe as like antique sounding
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
synthesizers. Like Aphex Twin has some of them in his really like decayed, beautiful string sounds he
Mm-hmm.
used on some of his more classical things, or like the Selected Ambient Works 2 sounds, where it
Yes.
sounds like, you know, it's a great soundtrack for like a night drive through snow, and it sounds like it's repetitive rhythms, but it sounds like everything's kind of falling apart too. Like some of the
Oh my God, I have to interrupt you one more time because of the night
what?
drive through snow and the sounds.
Yeah,
Uh,
go ahead.
uh, Ryuichi Sakamoto and Alva Noto, they have an album called Varun, I think is how it's pronounced.
I haven't heard
And
that one, but yeah, I've,
they have that whole series of all these super minimal, like ambient classical electro.
mhm.
And that one I was listening to driving over Snoqualmie Pass at like the worst
Yeah,
conditions I've ever driven over. And
yeah,
I grew up in Roslyn, so like I've been
right.
over that pass a million
That's saying
times.
a lot for you. Yeah,
And I was just listening to that as I was driving 25 miles an hour with no visibility, and it was the perfect setting. So I think you should check that out because I feel like you just described those sounds, and I'd
yeah,
be interested to hear what you think of that.
yeah. There's another
So
great. Have you heard William Selman? He's a
no,
uh, person in Portland who makes synth music that I really like. He's another. He's kind of. I would describe his stuff as not too far from the John Hassel, like Fourth World kind of vein
okay,
of music. Really, kind of lush instrumentals, but he does some really antique sounding like synths too, and it's hard for me to explain what that means. But anyway, I wanted to play
that's super
this
interesting.
and have
Yeah.
a real kind of a very organic approach, but like in sound, but not
Hmm.
necessarily made out of electronic circuits that are on the edge of working, you know.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and so, but then Kaivo was like, well, what can I do next? And physical models are a thing I was learning about up there, and it seemed like there was an opportunity to do something with physical models that other people hadn't done and really make them way more modulatable. Because this is kind of hard with physical models because they tend to like blow up if you look at them funny when you're
Uh
on the
huh.
programming end of things. It's often a physical. You can think of how to program a lot of kind of physical models actually pretty easily, but the hard part of programming them is proving that the energy in them is going to not exceed a certain boundary and blow up your
Okay.
computation.
Well, that was
So
something. I'm glad that you mentioned that because just going through my head of things I wanted to ask you about Kaivo.
sure,
You've got the different resonators that you can pick from, chimes and springs of different sizes and different types of strings. Like, do you actually take like data from those actual objects in like any sort of sound data from those and then put those into like, how do you program for those things or?
yeah, not really. So Kaivo is it's physical models and they're very physical. Like there's a for example, there's a model of a 2D plate, and there's a grid of numbers, right? That's this
Mhm.
model, and each number represents a physical position in the plate, and then the computation is like, how would this um, vibration communicate to other places nearby on the plate? And so the vibration makes its way
Mhm.
across, and based on like how big the thing is and how fast the waveform is, then you get resonances at a certain frequency, if that makes
Okay.
sense. Like
Mhm.
it's like a string but in 2D. So
Okay.
um, but it's a lot simpler than things are in the physical world. Like
Mhm.
uh, in physical world, things aren't uniform thickness and They
Yeah, and you
have
have
more
humidity
complicated
and air
shapes
pressure and yeah.
than a rectangle. And yeah, there's a lot of different ways that they can lose energy, and putting the energy in them is more complicated. And so I started with like what we're able to do instead of, as you asked, like taking a object and saying, how can we synthesize it, simulate it? I'm like, well, what can we do in real time on a computer? And then what can I make that sound like? So
Okay. Yeah, that's it's so when did you say it came out? In
14,
2014?
I think, is correct for Kaivo.
Oh, wow. Okay. So like the granular physical modeling thing, of course, like I don't actually really know when all of that stuff came on the scene or when we started getting really popular, but like I feel like granular synthesis has been like the something that like most synthesists are very, very interested in. And there's all, I feel like that's kind of like it's the hot thing for lack of a better term. So it's cool to hear that you were doing that a long time ago because people out there listening are going to instantly think of rings as like the early version of like some physical modeling with a resonator and whatnot. And yeah, I don't think that came out then. Maybe it was around then, but yeah. So were you aware of like mutable stuff then, or was this all kind of happening at the same
I
time? Or
I don't. I'm only aware of it as like a cultural
right? Yeah.
touchstone for
Uh huh.
people. Like, so I know what kind of people use it, and
Mm-hmm.
there are like a lot of people like on the Lines forum use the
Mm-hmm.
mutable instruments stuff. A lot of people that I know they're looking for something a little different, more exploratory in the modular realm. But I've never tried it.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I bring it up only because like rings was something that I liked what I heard from it and it was easy to make pretty stuff like without doing much, but I never understood what I was doing or I never really
Mhm.
gelled with it. And granular synthesis has always been kind of something that's been a little gaseous for me as far as understanding it. Um, but again, having like working through Kaivo has made me wrap my head around it a whole lot more. And also, like this is my long-winded way of saying like I wish there was a Kaivo module because that thing would
Oh
be
yeah.
yeah.
I could see, I mean, so many modules are, a computer connected to some knobs these
Oh,
days, right?
totally.
So
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
you could do that. You could do the 2D synthesis part, I think, pretty well now. So,
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of things I'd like to do if I could grow the company a
Of
little bit,
course. Yeah. Yeah.
branch out in new directions. But right now, software is the foundation of everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, let me clear the decks of your question by talking about the other two things. So we got Verta. Then I was kind of like, what can I do next? And it was a riff on. Um, if do you remember? Have you heard of the Korg X911?
I don't
It's like it's
know
a little guitar pedal.
the Korg X911. I'm gonna look that up.
Yeah, it's really when you look at it, you'll be like, wow, it's like one of these. If you're somebody who dreams about weird gear, sometimes it's like something that would show up in a dream. Like you're like, I dreamt there was this box and I put my voice into it, and this wheel came out, and it's like it's basically the
Oh,
part
cool.
of an MS-20 that does
Uh-huh.
the pitch to voltage and pitch to trigger functions. And they took it
Okay.
and they put it in a little box and said, well, let's sell this to guitarists. And they put some colored buttons on it for different modes. And
Uh-huh.
so I've had a ton of fun in the past playing around with one. And I was like, well, there's nothing like that really in digital format. Um, so that's Verta, which is like a real time mess your audio up,
Yeah.
patchable effect.
And it's like
And then
ring modulation kind of or some sort of like modifier and carrier and stuff like that.
yeah, it lets you patch. It's real easy to understand from a modular viewpoint because it gives you signals like CV and gate from your input, so you can patch those to whatever you want.
Yeah, I've been messing with that a little bit too, and I really like the doing like that the voice synthesizers. You have the two voice oscillators that you can choose and how
Hmm.
many voices and just yeah, you can get some. I've been using it as kind of like an end of chain master on some things too, which has been wild.
Uh
Um,
huh.
yeah, super fun.
I guess I can see that because you can let it will pass through a stereo signal and then you can add a little weird sparklies that it makes.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I'm
that's kind
still
of
wrapping
cool.
my head around that one, but I have
Yeah.
had a lot of fun with it.
And then Sumu coming out soon is like additive but FM. And the thing I think I'm bringing to the table with additive is a really easy way of programming it.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever seen a Kawai K5 or K5000, these kind of early digital synths. In particular, the K5 is a really funny one because it's like with additive, you should be able to make just about any sound by programming these partials over time. But then it gives you this interface that's like, a late 80s, like crosshairs pad and like a one numeric dial. And it's like, here you go,
I think
like,
I had like a rack mount version of this or something similar. Yeah. And yes, totally. Like, I would not have been into synths if I was my age, 30 years ago, because it's just too much diving and like, especially the digital side of things. Like, no way. It's just like, yeah. I just can't. I think I just lose interest too quickly or something.
Right. Instead of editing these complicated bits of data one by one, like editing a spreadsheet with a number pad, you have multi-channel patch chords. So every patch chord in Sumu has 64 channels in it that correspond to the 64 oscillators in a voice. So it can have, even if it's just constant, if you imagine say setting up a CV in a modular, you're like, I want to offset to the pitch, so I'm going to put a constant 2 volts from some module that'll do that and like plug that in. The Sumu equivalent could be like a constant 64 different numbers, like all in a bell or something like that, or a square, making a big square or something, and you patch that in, and then you're saying, what do I want each oscillator to do differently?
Wow. Okay. So in Kaivo, you can get up to your 8 voices, and then when you use the Vox modulation from the key output, you'll see all those different lines, or you'll notice when you're modulating stuff from the LFO or the noise, as you increase your voices, those lines, spread out within that viewer.
Right.
So rather than 8, we're talking about, you said 64?
It is like that, but it's it's all in one voice.
Oh, so I see.
In Kaivo, you're seeing a needle maybe for 2 voices, if that's 2 of them bouncing around. In Sumu, you don't see them because there's no good way I've thought of yet to make 64 of them like visible in it. But there's this scope. There's like a 64 channel oscilloscope thing over the side. We'll show in a bit, but it's like so every voice has 64 partials in it, and then it's so the one what's turning into 64 is like the one channel of audio that's in a patch chord. Now there's 64 of those. And
wow. Okay. Yeah. And so do you, as far as like layout and interface, like with these 64 signals within an oscillator, like, do you like how under, like, are there like presets where you can just like you can just select a collection of these types of modulation sources, so you can just kind of like right out of the box, like hit the ground running? Or do you go in and tell every 64 what to do? Like, does that make sense? I feel like that question.
I'm not quite sure what you're asking. Like, there's presets for sure.
Right.
No, the idea is to avoid editing them like one by one. I think Bess is answering what you're asking.
Yeah.
Like, and in fact, if you, in a lot of cases you can't. So if like that description where I was like, you can make a big bell curve of modulation, right? So if this is like partial 1 over here, and this is number 64 over here, and the values are all like that, right? You're looking at a graph. So you could make that shape, you can make it skinnier, so it's like totally flat, no change until the middle where it does that, and then it goes over to there.
I see.
And you can make it wider, and you can change the shape of that thing and make it like a square wave. So there's a lot of tools create modulation sources, and I'll continue to add more. But there's nowhere where you go in and say, I want number 5 to be like 0.4 more.
Right. Okay.
I don't want to think that way. So,
I'm actually relieved
I offer
that
a different tool set.
Yeah, I'm relieved because that seems, I was like, oh, that would be hard for people like with my type of brain. Okay.
And so far
cool.
I'm having one thing I judge the success a lot of the software by like, can I do some shit pretty much at random and have it likely to sound good? I think modular in general, you know, you can be in an intellectual mode with it. Like I'm designing my patch and what it's going to do, or you're just like, sometimes, and that can be fun.
Absolutely.
So
100%.
Having software, the software is no good if it can't allow that kind of mode of discovery also.
I think, I mean, what you just described as, as patching, like just like haphazardly like that, I would say that was the first 3 years of my modular experience. And that is often how I gauge how much I like a module, is like, can I plug it in and start patching with it without looking at the manual first, and at least like make stuff that sounds interesting and fun? Maybe not like full pieces of music, but just like, can I turn knobs and then within a few minutes, like have some, okay, this knob will kind of bring me into this territory and what.
A dear friend used to talk about what he called the 250 mic test of gear. And it's not microphones, but micrograms.
Okay.
And so his one test for gear was, can I be super dosed and actually still use it effectively? And like, not that.
Yeah, I like that.
Not, I think it's a good test.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, so we were talking a little bit yesterday about doing this episode, and I told you I was like purposely haven't been asking you about Sumu because I wanted to learn about it here. So why don't we pop it open and you can kind of run us through it and show us the different components of it and show us some sounds.
Okay, let's do that. I'm going to set up the green screen like we talked about. So maybe magically this will accelerate on the video or something. I'll find out later.
All right. I am super excited to introduce you to Keanu. Keanu is a matrix mixer. Traditionally, matrix mixers need, other modules to plug into to then mix the voltages around per channel. But Keanu comes with 4 built in. So on channel 1 and 2, we have a function generator that you have control of rise and fall time over. We have rise and fall. We have end of rise and end of fall trigger outputs for those. There is a trigger input. Right now it's in looping mode. So right here you can switch these two to be in trigger or looping mode. And then you can break the connection from the onboard sources on each channel by plugging something external in to the input. Channel 3 is where things get really interesting. Basically what we have here are 3 different oscillators that are kind of meandering in voltage and don't really have any link to each other. And that's what the 3 and 4 channels are. We have control over the frequency, and then we can add some slew. But why don't we just take a look at the data here, and I'll run each channel in and just show you each one of the modulation sources. There's our first function generator on channel 1. Here's our second function generator on channel 2. Here's our first meandering voltage there on channel 3. And then our meandering voltage on channel 4. Now with the slew all the way down on the channels 3 and 4, let me turn the frequency up really quick so you can see. One is more, square shape and one is more triangle, but you can add slew to each one of those. What's really cool about this is we have different frequency control CV inputs for each of the 3 oscillators that make up the modulation source on channel 3 and 4. There's also CV control of each channel's slew. Each output has a bipolar or a unipolar switch on it, so you can get into some really, really fun modulation there. When you go into that mode, each of the built-in modulation sources, their corresponding knob is going to be at 0 when in the center. And then to the left will be negative, to the right will be positive. Additionally, each channel does have its own VCA, so you can send an envelope into that, so it's not just always coming out. You can actually control when the signal comes out via these VCA inputs. And as I mentioned, you can break the normal connection of each one of these onboard modulation sources, and you can do that individually, so you can use a combination of external modules and the built-in. So let's just take an output from the mini peg here and put that in a channel 1. What's really cool about the channels 1 and 2 with the function generators, if you are using an external CV source like I am this mini peg's envelope, you can actually use the rise and fall controls to add slew to those external signals. And this also applies to the slew on the channels 3 and 4. So for those of you wondering, yes, it can be used as an audio mixer as well. And what's cool about this is the rise and fall controls on channels 1 and 2, as well as channel 3 and 4's slew knobs, can all be used as sort of filters. So let's check that out. Thanks for checking out Keanu. I cannot wait to release it out into the wild. It's going to be, it's going to be 3 or 4 months probably, but I just couldn't hold it in any longer. This thing's been mostly done for a while, and I've been kind of telling people about it. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled for more announcements and more in-depth videos about Keanu.
I don't know where to start. I don't really have a spiel going.
Well, here, I had an idea I was going to ask you. Like, it's the same kind of UI as Alto and Kaivo and Verta. Like, you have the patcher in the middle, and then so you have a top row of modules and a bottom row of modules. Is that so? Why don't you run us through all those individually?
It looks the same. Yeah, I'll talk about each module individually really quick before diving in and messing with it that much.
Yeah.
It looks like the other synths, but there's a major difference we were talking about where each of these patch cables has 64 channels. So it kind of breaks the symmetry of all the products in that way. But this one's really special. So I don't think it'll be confusing.
Okay.
I think it'll seem like you're using just one patch cord, but you're like, wow, it's got all this data in it. It kind of makes me want real world, like if there were some kind of Euro rack squared standard for like multi-channel audio, that would be cool, but then it would be digital, not analog, and you wouldn't be able to make a fun little distortion module. Right. So
yeah,
and with duct tape or whatever. Anyway, Sumu, yeah, so it's got the top, it says what you are using or on the Apple Silicon now, and it's got the patch, all that stuff. So the modules, it's got an input module here, like all the synths does basically the same stuff. You can select the number of voices, and it's got these cool little lights. The partials
and your key, like your modes and
input scale. Is like if it were a modular system, it would be your MIDI to CV converter.
Okay.
So it's taking the It's taking the MIDI info from your controller, what have you, and turning it into signals you can use in the patcher, like gate, but just the same concept as MIDI to CV, really.
Okay.
So then in partials, there's this companion program called Vutu, where you can take any sound that you have and put it into this partials format. So I was talking about 64 partials before. Sumu has 64 partials in each voice. This other program takes your sound in and converts it into this format. And you might ask, why don't I just drag and drop it into here? It's because there's I can show really quick, bring up Vutu. It's got all of these, the program for converting it, Vutu, has all these different options on it, and it's pretty complicated. It's kind of like, I think on the Synclavier, they had different software just for analyzing your sounds with all these options. So with Vutu, you do that, and then you kind of get out of that mode, hopefully, and just forget about that process while you're making your Sumu sounds. So moving on, it's got envelopes, and it's like an envelope generator with 64 channels. So the way I designed that is, there's normal ADSR here that people should be really familiar with. You can have a linear or exponential curve, which is really pretty. And then there's basically, this is like before, instead of editing everyone individually, how would you kind of say, well, I want them all to be different in this way?
Okay.
And so here, what you do for the envelope module is you pick ADSNR for your one envelope. Then you pick a scaling factor that it multiplies all those numbers by some other number. So if scale is 4, then your envelope, let's say ADNSR is your low one. That's what I call it. It's your low envelope. If scaling is 4, your high envelope is going to be 4 times as slow.
Okay.
And if scaling is 0.5, then your high envelope is twice as fast. Okay. So, and then it makes all these envelopes in between. So you end up with this family of envelopes, and when you you send them to different signals, it can do stuff like whoosh, make these kind of low pass filtering sounds without even any filters being in the mix yet. So,
cool.
A lot there. Pulses is like this crazy LFO to noise module. You're talking about what could be a cool rack module. I think this one would be really good, actually. There's nothing, you'd have to have multiple outputs, like maybe 16 jacks coming out, but I think that it could be useful as a standalone thing. Basically, you select a BPM and noise, and again, there's a high scale, so there's multiple LFOs. There's 64 of them, and then with the high scale, the high ones go faster. It's just kind of like the envelopes, or the high ones go faster or slower. And then there's a probability that each one's going to be re-triggered, so you can get all these. I'm going to try and stick to it and cut this description short, and maybe play around with it a little later, so people can see, because you want to start doing that. But it makes all these pulses that fire off a couple different shapes at the same time. And the whole reason I did this thing was to I wanted to make the sounds of water, like a bunch of raindrops are hitting in different places when you're walking through a forest, or better yet, you're by a stream. And over this place, because there's a little cavity in the stream, like a tiny canyon, you're hearing this bloop, 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 bloop. Where over here you're hearing and it's like, what if you wanted to design sounds like that, like statistical probabilities of different LFOs firing off in different places in space. So
very cool.
You can do that with this selection of modules. So with this one and the space one, we'll talk about a little later. So scope, you get a 64 channel oscilloscope for looking at these things. Oscillators is where all the oscillators are. and each partial is one 2 operator FM pair. So you can like have a carrier and a modulator.
Okay. And there you just select your 2 different waveforms that are going to be the carrier or the modulator.
So the waveforms, it's really each of these pairs is really simple because there's 64 of them, and you can already do things like reproduce just about any sound pretty well. So after you've reproduced the sound, you can be like, well, what would that sound like with FM added? And you can do things like that. So cool. They're both sine waves. So it's like a sine and sine, but each of them has a noise amount that you can add in.
Okay.
So
cool.
That sounds pretty cool. Then there's gates, and let you attenuate the oscillators with these decays, and then a space module lets you fly them all around in space. With like attenuation, Doppler shift, and you could like have them whirling around you like a tornado, or imagine they're kind of still. They're doing like the stream thing I was talking about before.
Yeah. Okay, so is because this is something that I've been really wanting to look into and try to figure out how to get good at is making things sound 3-dimensional in a stereo mix. Like have certain things happen, like, oh, that sounded like it was not just on the right side, but behind me on the right side. So
this should be really good at that.
Okay, great, cool. And is that just like basically like frequency attenuation or like?
Yeah, there's different ways of spatializing sounds. Okay. This right now I'm using a simple one called VBAP, which is like meant for panning things between different speakers, and it's just really when you spatialize things, a technique that you want to use for headphones is going to be really different from one that will sound good on speakers.
Right. Yeah.
Like the things that they do, like for virtual reality sound that you're listening to in headphones, you wouldn't want to hear on speakers. So this VBAP thing is meant more for speakers, where I assume most people are going to be listening to, other people's music, or, at least that's a baseline for it. So, but yeah, there's other ways of spatializing things I might add in the future. And just rounding things out, there's a filter, which is a really Moog style filter, which I've never done before, but it seemed to go right. Like you got something that's so digital and potentially like cold, or just anyway, kind of not opinionated, just like
with that much noise and
sound.
FM modulation, I imagine you can get a lot of like metallic and angular sounding.
Yeah, or things. Just if you turn things up too much, it just starts to sound noisy in a bad way. So it's like you can dial that back with a nice wet 4-pole Moog style filter, with resonance, and that's about it. Okay. So
and then for the spatializer, is that what you're calling it?
Yeah.
For that, what are the modulation inputs on that?
So I think if we want to get a little deeper into it, I should start maybe just playing some presets and like
that sounds great.
I can't really talk and like make a good preset at the same time.
Right. Yeah.
So you can hear often with additive, especially the old digital ones, you could make an additive synth, but like on those Kawais I'm talking about, you wouldn't have like having a nice percussion sound wasn't that possible, because everything's just a little bit slow, or like envelopes are slow, and so. But this is like if we put can you hear that pretty good?
Yeah.
If we just put a bell sound, it's got that nice clear ring to it. So that's one preset I have. And then you were asking about space, so we could probably like move the bell through space. So thanks. I'll try. So, well, one way is just by twisting the knobs. And if you hear that, you can actually hear it's a Doppler shift. Like when a car goes by you fast. Right. Can you hear that?
I don't think I can hear that through the speakers, but hopefully when you send me the audio.
Yeah. So if you move it and then you can do stuff like every partial is at a different place in the space, and you can select the position. Like I call it the home, because you can set a gate to it, which I'm doing now. I'm hooking the gate up to reset partials to home, and then all of the partials play at their homes, and then I can add this field where they all rotate, and then change the speed of that field. So now they're all rotating, and you should hear them. Again, maybe not over the speakers, but here it's very out of my laptop speakers. It's like really clear. It's like a Leslie effect almost.
Oh, cool. Right. Yeah.
They're rotating around the center. But like, it's crazy. Like, there are effects people made because they could, right? They got new technology like a tape delay.
Yeah.
And it's such a fun history. And here it's like almost abstracting things so much. Like, you could make something that sounds like a Leslie, but just one example of a sound you get when you're moving everything around in space.
Right.
And I think there's going to be a lot of new sounds that we'll hear that will come out of different ways of moving things around in space.
Well, I anticipated being excited about this after you started explaining it to me, but now I'm like really, really excited about it.
Let's see. So the easy way to get a different sound is just pick a different partial set. And you can like loop through them like you can with a sampler. Is my gate not hooked up? What's going on? Well, that's looping.
Whoa.
So I'll hook just gate up to the level too. Oh, there we go. That wasn't updated right. So gates, this is what I was talking about, trying to like make patches on the fly. It can be a little confusing. There we go. So I got gate is now controlling the level.
Oh, wow.
Of all the partials, and it just like turns off. So if we went back to the bell, it would just cut off with the gate, like you do with any sampler. But we also got the motion of them all around the center. And what was I going to try and do? I got distracted because it was sounding too wild. And then I just had to add a gate because I was like, make this sound stop. Oh, yeah, I was going to add some noise. Stuff. So I got this thing that sounds like a looping sample that's also whooshing around in space. And there's another, you were asking a while ago, what are some of the things you can modulate in space? So I can add like an envelope real quickly, setting the delay of the envelope now. So it comes up in a second. And now if I put the envelope to noise on the space module, it should get noisier. It adds position and noise to each partial. So and the effect of that, hearing that in sound, is like they start to get fuzzed out in this cool way that I think of as almost like dub techno-y, like a sound like Monolake would make. That's a super like contained like sound, like like high tech, but super fuzzy. It can make a very, I don't know if with this particular source sound it's doing that vibe for me, but it's you can hear with more noise.
Yeah. I like that.
And then, yeah. So
wow, that's I mean, just over the computer speakers there, that sounded kind of like formanty there.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of ways to make formats. So let me go. I was talking about that. If there's one patch I don't know how much time we have, but if there's one I want to demonstrate, it's this very wet one, because I was talking about like, I'm laughing because it makes funny sounds when you switch between the patches, because instead of just like, it's just like alto, where instead of like a soft synth might shut everything down and then start it up when you go to the next patch. On my synths, I always just let all the parameters like change to whatever the next thing is, like that you would, and it makes really funny, weird sounds in between. Okay, here's the wet one. Let's see if it can play like I intended.
Really? That seriously sounds like a babbling creek, though. Like,
yeah,
that's awesome. So
it's
this
got
will
a long
be
tail on
not
it.
just useful for like making
out.
music, but like this could be a really useful tool for sound design, or for.
Oh, I think of it as a great sound design machine because it's so spatial. Do you know the Human League song "The Black Hit of Space"? It's a funny one.
I'm not probably not. I'm not sure.
It's off there. I've always wanted to call a patch that, and finally I've got a patch that's good enough. It's like really creepy. It's all these. This could be like a background from an old British sci-fi show, like Blake 7 or something.
Yeah.
And it's all these partials just like going away from you towards the center. It's kind of ominous.
Oh, that's awesome. I cannot wait to hear like this stuff like in my studio on the speakers and stuff.
Yeah. And it does, like, it can do these. That's a patch that just takes the Moog filter and does a filter sweep, but it demonstrates it does that stuff okay too, like the kind of analog emulation of the filter is really nice. And there's a lot. I find like feeding it with loops of modular stuff is great. I've got this one patch. It's like, it just adds.
Yeah, we got time, so if you want to go through as many as you want.
I'm kind of free associating now, so I want to kind of let you drive more, actually, so I just don't dive in and just demonstrate 50 or patches. But I'm just like a few things that it does well. I'm going to get some more gleepy, just like modular loops that I have around, things that never turn into a song or whatever, and like... what do you mean? Because you can do stuff when you change the partials, it does stuff with those very chonky kind of modular sounds that are like you couldn't do in the analog world that easily.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to making some noise with this and some of those old loops I have around.
In kind of a roundabout way, you can use it as an effects processor almost.
Yeah, it takes some time, but it's like see, the thing is, so again, it might not be obvious, but you can't like use it real time as an effects processor, because
you have to put the thing in.
You have to use this, you have to do this analysis that's kind of complicated. You can't do in real time, but you can bring as many as 60 seconds of sound in, so you could use it in like time stretch. You could take a minute of sound and time stretch it to like, all day if you wanted to.
Yeah. Nice. Oh man,
and I'm so
excited.
I've got this one. Did I make a patch out of it? Oh, I'm not sure I did.
Okay.
It can slow down vocals, and you hear weird stuff, like if there's vocal fry in a vocal, or like little it does this real microscopic slowing down of sound that's really different from like the granular stretching that kind of makes everything sloppy.
Yeah. Okay, well, this sounds really cool. And when is it going to be released to the world?
This is going to be before the end of the year.
Oh, really?
Come hell or high water. Yeah, like I'm just really ready to have more people.
Well, I know you've been working hard on it, and you're excited.
Yeah, it's been a crazy project. I did a whole new framework for it that like supports all the UI and stuff, because I was unsatisfied with the old one I was using, and so yeah, it became a long a long thing,
Yeah.
but a long process. But I'm happy with where it's at now.
Okay.
People can start listening to it.
And now,
And
is
so
that
yeah,
going to be
even
for
if
both Windows and Mac
yeah,
by the end of the
Windows
year?
and Mac,
Okay.
and it's yeah, the there's some chance, like if I don't have some things done, I might say, oh, this is an early access release. My friend
Uh-huh.
Sherryar is telling me in games, people do that a bunch. So one way or
Okay.
another, I'm just going to put out what I have, and as long as it's not crashing, too
Hmm.
frustrating to use. But right now, it's not really crashing at all, so it's just really
Yeah.
slow. But that's what I hope to improve.
Yeah, right on. And then I also wanted to ask, and because my friend David keeps asking me, because we talk a lot, and then when I talk about like working with you, I honestly have just been like gushing to him about how much I love Kaivo a lot, and he's been asking, are there going to be more sound planes available in the world at any point?
Um, it is my fond hope that will be true. Like
Yeah,
doing hardware, as everyone who's done it knows, is like harder than you thought in ways you've never imagined.
yeah,
And like, especially an instrument like the sound plane that is, complicated,
hmm,
and standalone. So I want to get back to it, but I want to grow the company to like a few people to help me support
yeah,
more
for
sound
sure.
planes in the world.
Yeah,
Um, and
you hear that,
it's been a
everybody
long road,
listening?
because I didn't want to say like, hey, um, venture capital firm, do you want to help me do this idea? And they'll be
Right.
like, sure, you can make it out of plastic, and
Yeah.
we have to sell 50,000 the first year, otherwise you're going to go bankrupt. And
Right.
but if you do that, it'll be okay, because just like move fast and break things and fail. And I'm like, no,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not happy with that model of things and the effect it's had on the whole musical instrument industry
Yeah.
to the extent it has.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're interested, but only if you can do it right.
Yeah.
That's good. Um, well, I always
So if you
give
want
the
to if you want a sound plane, buy some software, I guess the short
yeah,
answer,
right.
right?
Yeah, I was just gonna
Yeah.
say, yeah. For those of you who are saying when are we getting sound planes, go out there and buy some Madrona software. Another thing I wanted to mention is that I didn't really know how like the cost of this stuff because you gave me the licenses since I was making videos and stuff. But once
Yeah,
I
yeah.
did look it up, and they're so incredibly affordable, as far as plugins go. And I think that's um, certainly cheaper than buying a module. So
Depends on the module, but yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, a module that's going to do everything that Alter
Oh,
Archivo does, yeah, you're gonna
yeah.
you're gonna have to buy a number of modules and spend a couple grand
That's for
probably.
sure. And analog stuff is great, and it's a nice happy thing to use both, for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Well, I always like to give the guest the last few
A
minutes to
lukewarm
scream.
statement that was, but it's true. We're so nice and happy using all the
Yeah,
nice things that you
yeah.
say.
Um, what would you like to scream from the modular mountaintops before we sign off today?
Um, what is this, like the end of Hot Ones? But I didn't have to eat all those wings.
Yeah,
I
kind
get
of.
to
Yeah,
just say whatever.
I asked this nebulous question to everybody without warning them that it's coming because I like to see what it kicks at
Oh
what
man,
different brains it kick out.
just nah, just scream. I don't know. Be nice to people. Like
I
the
like
first
that
thing that
one.
comes
I
to
like
mind. But I
that
like to
one.
think most of your listeners are probably on board with that already. I
Yeah.
don't know. Yeah, I've really, the ideas of humane design, humane technology have been really um, influential on the stuff that I make. Like reading about people and the history of how they design things to try and enhance people's lives when that's the focus. Like,
Uh-huh.
and so if anybody doesn't know, there's a whole literature out there. There's a book by Don Norman called the Poetry of Everyday Things, I think is
Okay.
the name, or I think
I
he had to
like that.
retitle it at some point. But Don Norman is
I hate to
what
play
is it?
favorites, but that's one of my favorite answers to that question so far.
Oh, the design
Um,
of everyday things. Yeah,
okay.
And yeah, Christopher Alexander, his book The Timeless Way of Building, and the other ones in his series, he talks about architecture and like how to break a big problem down into a lot of smaller ones that are like patterns that you can assemble. It's called A Pattern Language, is the book. Huge influence on me and how I do
That
things.
might
I
be
like to
useful for me and my
spread knowledge of
ADHD
that.
brain. Yeah.
And yeah.
Oh shit.
That's that,
Well,
I guess.
I just want to say, thank you for all of the stuff that you make. Thank you for, reaching out to me to help out with the video stuff. It's, we've always ran into each other and had really nice conversations when we were out at similar events and stuff. So it's a really good excuse for me to get to interact with you more, because that's just something I like to do. So yeah, thanks for all that.
Same. Always have good talks. And like, if you are you a diner person? Do you like to go to like a diner where they have browns and
for sure. Yeah,
stuff like that? Hollandaise sauce.
Oh,
yeah, we got to go to the Hobnob. We got to go to the
Okay.
Hobnob sometime in Tacoma. It's
Okay. All right. I haven't been, but yeah, eggs Benny's. That's like my breakfast of choice.
Okay.
So yeah,
right,
I was gonna say I want to get you down here and get you in the studio and show you the house and stuff and hang.
Right. Absolutely.
But we can do that off air. We'll schedule that off air. But thank you so much for coming on and showing us Sumu. And yeah, this has been great.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Dude, we did it. All right, that's our show. Thank you so much for coming back to Podular Modcast. Thank you to Randy for joining us and sharing his wonderful new synthesizer, Sumu, coming out very soon. Don't sleep on this. I cannot wait to get my copy of it because I love Kaivo and Alto and Verta so much. It's just going to be really fun to have another Madrona product in the arsenal. As you know, the holiday season is in full swing, and I like to do a Christmas music episode. So please, if you would like to make a Christmas track and submit it, then hit me up in the DMs or at podmodcast@gmail.com. And yeah, we'll have some fun with that. And I think we'll end this episode on a little rendition of Linus and Lucy from the Charlie Brown Christmas that I'm working on. And yeah, hopefully that will give you some motivation to create your own Christmas tracks. Let's get weird with it. And yeah, that's all for this week. This week's secret word is peanuts. Until next week.